So Canada to Panama 1, a little bit later release because audio is hard to come by. Guys, we do primarily Canadian African content, so if you like the type of content, on the football pitch, give us a subscribe and we go from there. So we saw Canada to Panama 1. Now, I actually went to this game live, so it was a good experience also. Shout out to everybody I saw there, the people who I did see, the people who I didn't see. Special shout out on the Rise. Good to see you. Though I did walk by him and I was like, wait, is that? Yeah, with my crew. So I do apologize, but it was good times. And then row 18 in our section 223, row 18, y'all made that game vibes. Do appreciate y'all, but let's start talking about that game. So there's a lot of conversations in terms of the pitch. It wasn't good. There's a lot of different aspects of it I do want to bring up, though. The pitch wasn't at its highest form for BMO Field. However, what that brought up was an opportunity to kind of talk about styles and players and how that kind of worked. The pitch comes up with a lot of people, and whether that's a fair point or not, it is a thing that was a key point to talk about. So we'll start with the starting lineup. Crepo in goal with Larea Bombito, Cornelius and Davies as your back line, right to left. Sonia Eustaquio, Ahmed, and Schaffelberg in the middle, and then David and Laren up top. So your classic 4-4-2 coming in. And I think with the pitch being what it was, the other thing that kind of was interesting was that it did start raining at the beginning of kickoff. They did delay the game a little bit just to clean up the pitch as much as possible. But the pitch wasn't conducive to some passing. And not to say that some players struggled, but this was the type of a game when you watched it and I said, for the directness of a player like Jacob Schaffelberg, his first touch and his control, that became evidently a bit of a struggle based off the pitch and just how slick the pitch was. You want someone maybe who wasn't moving as fast, but someone who could do their best to pace themselves on that type of a pitch. And I think when we saw the sub come in for Liam Miller later in the second half, Miller was able to, or Liam Millar, however you want to say it, was able to do a better job of really playing and letting the ball dictate the pace of how he was going to move versus him trying to dictate. And I felt Schaffelberg did that a few times where he tried to get on the front foot, but then a touch too heavy, or the ball would skid. They try to send balls forward, and then the ball would kind of go through and skid off of on the first bounce. So they had to adjust to the environment, which was actually, hey, I always say, when someone scores on you first, or what have you, free adversity with a side of chips. So we were able to see them try to adjust to that at the home pitch, and that will be a very interesting thing to kind of take a look at moving forward. I still think, though, when we look at the matchups, I think Thomas Christensen is still, just based off longevity, he is the best coach in this region. And I think walking through this game, the Panama game was the game I think we were expecting, Canadians at least, were expecting to get versus Mexico. Just how they were set up trying to pass through. And now in many ways, their first goal pressure was pressure that was brought in from the forwards, and then they turned them over, and that turned into a situation where it's 1-0 Canada. But you saw how they set up trying to invite some pressure, but then passing through. Now, this Panama side didn't go full strongest 11. Castilla didn't come on until the second half. But you saw what they were trying. They were trying to flip the pitch and switch the play in some movements when they got the ball to the middle based off how Canada was pressing them. And you saw them just based off of the passing and how they were just mucking up the game. And it wasn't really, they weren't really mucking up, but they were just making it difficult for Canada to really move and progress. That on top of the pitch, that on top of the rain, it didn't help. I saw someone make a comment and say Canada really needs to play better competition. I think this is a perfect test for them because any team that fears their speed are going to play them like this. And then any team that doesn't fear them will just pass through them. And then that will be much more eye-opening, and that will be much more of a tough pill to swallow. So I think they need to be used to playing these types of games because that's what the region is going to offer them. But then furthermore, when they start to playing better sides, I think that's where you will have to be much more disciplined and move forward. But a lot of it was just making and taking away the avenues and making it more difficult, where then you were inviting individual play, right? There were a lot of people around where we were sitting who were talking, they came to this game because last time Panama was here, it was Alphonso Davies and that moment of brilliance that he had. So I was like, okay, maybe he's going to do something special again. And you could tell how Christians had a team set up, really, instead of pushing things outside, really trying to push everything back into the middle of the pitch. And Davies on a couple occasions took those chances. And he was both effective and then a little bit problematic moving forward. And so for me, that's going to be a thing that's going to come up. And he's done a better job, Davies, that is, to pick his spots moving forward. And I like the maturity in his game since he's got the captaincy. But it's something that they're going to test him out, and they are going to tempt him and say, we are taking everything away. Now you beat us one-on-one. And sometimes he might have to do it. And so looking at how they are progressing and what they look like, I think Panama gave them a tough chance in terms of what they could see versus other CONCACAF teams, but also some other teams that face them around the world who maybe will have the athletes, but then also the technical discipline to say, okay, we're just going to funnel everything into this space and we're going to make it. And maybe another team will decide we're just going to take away your fullbacks moving up. We're going to say, yeah, center backs, Cornelius, Bobbito, you guys have to make this pass. You guys have to initiate these. We're going to take away the midfield. We're going to take away the wing outlets. So we're going to make you guys have to create something out of nothing. And so it was good to see some of that maturity and some of those opportunities coming through. But that was what really made it a little bit a cagey game. But then ultimately, nearing the end of the first half, Kyle Aaron scores off some pressure after choosing their spots where the press. And I think that's going to be an interesting thing. Canada's going to be a side that's going to press, but they're going to have to pick their spots. The better the teams that they play, they'll have to pick their spot. Because ultimately, some teams will make it more difficult for them. And I think that's what will make it a lot more challenging for them moving forward. But that's what you saw. Then, second half comes in, you have subs. Miller and Osorio come in for Schaffelberg and Schwanyao. Schwanyao didn't have the best of halves, but again, everything was funneled into the chaos in the middle. Stakio picked up a yellow. There's a few yellows already picked up in this game. I will say this, speaking of that, the referees in this matchup were consistent and had a good handle on this game. My one thing with the refs is I don't need you to be awesome, I don't need you to be terrible, I just want you to be consistent. And from the get-go, they were handing out yellows, saying, okay, we're not going to accept any of this. Just because it was Thanksgiving weekend here in Canada when that game happened. I was joking to the guys I was with. Like they felt like that auntie who was telling you to stay out of the pot before Thanksgiving, that they were on top of things. Free kicks, being moved, all aspects of things. They were very good refs. I appreciated the game. They handled the game and kept a good lid on it. It was a cagey affair. A few moments where you definitely saw some tempers flaring, but they did a good job to keep a good handle on the game. So I liked what they were able to do. Eventually, Panama is able to equalize, and moving the ball through the middle. I think that's going to be the key thing where I do wonder where the conversation goes with Marsh in terms of where does he think he needs to alter. We finally got a game here where both nines scored. And Kyle Aaron has been a topic of conversation. He's scored for club finally, and now he's scored for country. But do you sacrifice a 9 with the idea of adding in a third midfielder, right? Nico Seeger is there. Luc de Fougerolles is there. There are midfielders, and I feel that a third midfielder wouldn't help. Even if you played a trio of Kone, Schwanyao, and Eustachio, I think that could be effective enough in terms of giving enough support not only to your center backs and your full backs, but then also moving the ball forward. But it will just sacrifice one of your 9s. But I think that's a good conversation for Jesse Marsh to have moving forward based off of how the teams were looking. And then with Miller in the game, then you saw Bear and Saliba come in for Larin and Eustachio. So fresh new So a fresh new midfield would start again. But then you started to see some turnovers happen in midfield. Fresh legs did a good job. Jonathan David scores in the 87th minute. He wins the second ball, gets the ball out to Liam Miller. And then the same thing we talked about, a player who was playing at the pace of the pitch versus trying to play faster than the pitch. Miller was able to do that, get the ball back into Jonathan David, scores. Canada's up 2-1. I think the interesting thing also is, like, Panama's had a habit of conceding late goals. Maybe they're just running out of energy. They are a team that I think Christensen is squeezing so much out of this lemon and this lime. He's making good orange juice right now, or lemonade. But I think they're gonna need some more younger citrus to add to this Five Alive drink that they're drinking, because I think that sustainability will keep them going. Because if not, Costa Rica is starting to get themselves fixed, but that's a whole nother conversation. But I think you have that, and then at the end, Ahmed and David come off for Poku and Waterman. Good start, the CPL boys coming in. So I think at the end of the day, 5 minutes of additional time, Canada wins 2-1. It's interesting thinking about this because they didn't have Kone, they didn't have Johnston. Tejan is just getting back onto the pitch. I do wonder, in terms of how Marsh looks at this roster and says, are we missing anything? I would argue, I know I was listening to a podcast and someone was saying, yeah, okay, the wingers, you have competition now. I would say add more. I don't know if a Frifa is that. I don't know if that, but I mean, I'm looking at a player like Luka Koleosho. Add him to the left side. Davies is clearly your fullback. But if you add a Koleosho to that, you give some time for Ahmed to develop. You give time for Schaffelberg to get form for club. Because I do like Schaffelberg, but I think the style that he plays is more suited for 45 minutes in the second half. Like, I feel like if you're going to have those two, you platoon Miller and Schaffelberg, and then it's just, okay, we're just only going all gas for him, and you're pushing the pace. And then for a player like Liam Miller, you're just weathering. Or you're bringing him and you're just swapping them out. But I think that left side, though it looks decent right now, I think it could be used to improve. The nines, I feel like, and this is where the conversation with Kwesi Poku is, I don't know if he has a future as a 9 on the squad, because Bear is looking better. Ugbo, you assume, will be back at some point, right? You still have folks who are holding out hope for Daniel Jebison. Like, Poku, at his level, fair or not, feels to me like a player that you look at and say, maybe he's more of that Richie Larea replacement versus, say, a 9, right? And maybe that's not fair to the player. I saw someone make a comp and say, like, maybe Ali Ahmed could be more of that, comparable to like a Junior Hoylett. Maybe, we'll see. We'll have to take a look at it. Set pieces, they just have to start to be able to effectively convert them. Deliveries have been better, a little bit more inconsistent. Davies has been put off of those, but between Schwanyao, Schaffelberg, Eustachio, who I think is their best set piece taker in their current setup, I think Hoylett is their overall best set piece taker overall. I think they need to find a solution there. I mean, they don't have the play where they go long to Victoria, who heads it back to the middle, and then the ball is played in. But I think they need to fix that and kind of clean that up. So with that being said, they now have Suriname in the Nations League. It's going to be a long trip because it's South America for the first game and then Toronto for the second. And Suriname will be a very interesting side. It's how times have changed from 3 years ago to now. But yeah, really excited to see what they're able to bring up and what this looks like. But for now, Canada 2-1. Thanks to points, they're second in CONCACAF rankings. 100 points behind Mexico and about 30 points ahead of the U.S. So we'll kind of see how that goes. But yeah, you guys let me know what you thought about the game. As always, I'm going to stop talking right here.